In September of 1893, a mine foreman named Elias Prout stood at the face of the lowest drift in the Silver Ledge shaft, 340 feet below the floor of DeWabb County, Utah. The Tintic mining district had been pulling silver from these hills since 1870, and by 1893 the work had made several men wealthy and made several hundred men old before their time. Prout was not wealthy. He had managed the Silver Ledge's lower development headings for 4 years, responsible for blasting schedules, timbering below the 200-foot level, and the daily log that recorded every foot of advance, every charge set, every shift rotation since the shaft opened in 1889. He was, in the language of the district, a careful man. On the morning of September the 3rd, his crew was working adrift, heading north by northwest from the main shaft, following a silver vein that had been narrowing for 2 weeks. Prout had authorized one final blast before recommending the heading be abandoned. The charge went off at 7 in the morning. At 7:18, when the smoke had cleared enough for the crew to advance with their lamps, they found that the far wall of the drift had not fractured cleanly. It had opened. The rock had come down not as rubble to be mucked out, but as a clean break, and behind it was a passage that had not been made by any drill or charge Prout had ever ordered. The passage ran forward into the dark. The walls were flat. The floor was level. The ceiling was cut at a consistent height above the floor. Prout stood at the entrance with his lamp and looked at it for a long time. Then he sent the crew to the surface. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. He spent the rest of the morning alone in the passage with a single lamp and a measuring rope. The passage ran 31 feet before terminating in a chamber. He measured the chamber at 12 feet across and 8 feet in height. The walls had been worked to a consistent flat plane on all 4 sides, and the working was not new. The stone held the color and texture of surfaces long deprived of air and light. The floor was dry and covered in a thin layer of pale dust that had not been walked on in a very long time. Prout measured the passage twice and confirmed a width of 4 feet and 2 inches and a ceiling height of 6 feet and 8 inches throughout its length, consistent from the entrance to the chamber wall without variation. The angles were too regular for a natural void. The floor was too level for a collapsed stope. The proportions too controlled for anything produced by the movement of water through rock. He also noted that the chamber was empty. No tools, no bone, no ash from a fire. Whatever had once been in this space had been removed. On the far wall, at approximately the height of a man's chest, there were marks. Lines and curves arranged in horizontal rows running across the full width of the stone. Some of the lines were deep, cut with a tool that left a clean V-section channel. Others were shallower and appeared to have been made at a different time, possibly by a different hand. The rows ran parallel to one another at consistent spacing, approximately 4 inches apart. Prout had no frame of reference for any written system. He did not claim to know what the marks were. He wrote later that he knew what intention looked like, and the marks looked organized. He noted one detail he would return to several times. The edges of the cuts were sharp, no rounding, no mineral deposit filling the grooves. The cuts looked recent, but the dust on the chamber floor had not been walked through. He went back to his office at the surface and did not enter any of this in the official mine log. 3 days later, he wrote a letter to the Silver Ledge District Superintendent, a man named Robert Carver, whose office was in the town of Eureka. The letter survives in the DeWabb County Historical Society archive in Nephi, Utah. It runs to 2 pages in Prout's firm, unhurried hand. He describes the passage, the chamber, the dimensions he measured, the empty floor, and the marks on the far wall. He notes their arrangement, their depth variation, and the fact that the cut edges showed no weathering. He writes that he believes the chamber was constructed, not formed, and he asks Carver what he should do. He signs it with his full name. Carver came to the shaft on September the 7th. He brought 2 members of the Silver Ledge Board of Directors who were visiting the district from Salt Lake City that week, and a 4th man identified in the mine's surface log only as J.W. Fitch, with the notation Government Surveyor written beside his name. No J.W. Fitch appears in any surveying license record or federal employment roll for the Utah Territory in 1893. The surface log records that the group descended at 9 in the morning and returned to the surface at 2 in the afternoon. 5 hours underground. The mine log for September the 4th, 5th, and 6th, the 3 days between Prout's letter and Carver's arrival, contains no entries at all. The log had been maintained without interruption since the shaft opened in 1889. Every blast, every shift, every foot of drift advanced was recorded, each entry dated and initialed. Those 3 days are blank. The entry dated September the 7th is written in a different hand from the one that had kept the log before it. Prout's handwriting does not appear in the Silver Ledge log again after September the 3rd. What Carver's group did during those 5 hours is not recorded. What followed is. On September the 9th, a crew of 4 men arrived at the shaft from outside the regular Silver Ledge workforce. They did not sign the company employment register. They were paid in cash. They worked the 9th and the 10th. On the morning of September the 11th, the drift at the 340-foot level was sealed, not shored with timber, not gated, sealed with a masonry wall of fired brick set in hydraulic cement, running floor to ceiling, 2 feet thick, built to carry load. The supply receipt for the materials survives in the DeWabb County Historical Society records, addressed to the Silver Ledge Company and dated September the 10th. It lists 200 fired brick, 16 sacks hydraulic cement, and 4 lengths of iron rail for delivery to the shaft collar. The receipt is signed not by Carver but by J.W. Fitch. Closing a producing drift in a silver mine with a permanent masonry wall during the silver panic of 1893 was not a routine operational decision. The Sherman Silver Purchase Act had been repealed that August. Mines across the Tintic district were cutting wages and laying men off. Someone decided that the passage Prout's crew had opened was not to be shored, not to be gated, not to be left with a warning and a timber barricade. Someone decided it was to be made permanently inaccessible. That decision cost more than $200 in materials alone, in the worst month the silver market had seen in decades. The brick went up, the log went blank for the 3 days before it. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Elias Prout left the Tintic district in the fall of 1893. He settled in Carbon County and found work in the coal mines near Price, where he spent the next 11 years underground in a different kind of dark. He retired around 1904 and died in Price in 1917. He did not speak publicly about the Silver Ledge during those years. His daughter, a woman named Clara Prout Henshaw, gave an interview to a local historical society in Price in 1941, when she was in her mid-60s. She was asked about her father's time in the silver country. She said that her father had told her once, not long before his death, that he had found something in the Tintic Hills that he wished he had not found, and that he believed other people had known it was there before his crew blasted through the wall. She did not know what he meant. The interviewer moved to the next question. The transcript is in the Carbon County Historical Society collection, 8 pages long, with that passage on page 5, 6 lines in the middle of a conversation about something else. The Silver Ledge continued operating, intermittently, until 1921. In those 28 years, the sealed drift at the 340-foot level is not mentioned in any surviving company document. A mine surveyor named Howard Belk mapped the Silver Ledge workings for a consolidation study in 1912. His underground survey map, held at the Utah State Historical Society, shows every drift and level with measured notation. At the 340-foot level, heading north by northwest, there is one anomaly. Belk marked it. Disused heading, inaccessible. He saw the brick wall. He recorded it without measuring what was behind it. The heading is the only section of the Silver Ledge workings not described or dimensioned in his survey. The Ute had traveled through the hills that became the Tintic mining district for centuries before a silver vein was found there in 1870. The Uinta and San Pitch bands both ranged through what is now DeWabb County, moving between the high country and the desert floor with the seasons, and returning each year to places that mattered. By the 1880s, most of their territory had been transferred under a series of treaties negotiated through the previous 2 decades, and the bands had been settled on the Uinta Reservation to the northeast. What they carried out of these hills when they left was not a silence about them. An Indian agent named Caleb Humphrey, stationed at the Uinta Agency in the early 1880s, kept a journal of his conversations with Ute elders. The journal is held at the Church History Library in Salt Lake City. In a spring entry from 1883, Humphrey records a conversation with a man he identifies as Pa-Vatz, an elder of the San Pitch Band, about the Tintic Range. Humphrey writes that Pa-Vatz told him there were places in those hills that the Ute did not enter, not because they were forbidden, because something had been put there that did not belong to the Ute, and the Ute had always understood that. The elder used a word Humphrey renders phonetically as approximately Pa-Vatz, which he translates as something left, with the written clarification that the word did not mean abandoned. It meant placed deliberately by someone who intended it to stay. Humphrey asked how long these places had been in the hills. Pa-Vatz looked at him, by the agent's account, for a long moment before answering. Then he said, "Before the grandfathers of the grandfathers." Humphrey did not press. He moved to other subjects. The journal entry is 3 paragraphs long, and the conversation about the hills takes up the middle one. The Silver Ledge was not the only mine in the Tintic district, where the ground returned something unexpected during the silver years. In 1891, 2 years before Prout's crew opened the wall, a shaft crew at the Emerald Mine, working 60 feet shallower than the Silver Ledge's lowest level, reported a void behind a blast face. The foreman filed a report with the district office. The report is in the Tintic mining collection at the Utah State Historical Society. It describes a cavity approximately 6 feet in diameter, with walls showing tool marks inconsistent with any equipment then in use in the district. The cavity was measured, the dimensions recorded, and the heading was then packed with waste rock and abandoned. The district engineer who signed the report was listed as J.W. Fitch. 2 sites, 2 years apart, 12 miles between them, the same name. Fitch does not appear in the Utah Territorial Engineering records. He is not in any federal surveying role for the territory. His name is in the Emerald Mine Report from 1891, the Silver Ledge Surface Log from September of 1893, and the Silver Ledge Supply Receipt from September the 10th. After the receipt, there is no record of him in the district, the territory, or any adjoining state. He certified both closures. He left the same kind of absence he had arrived into. In 1896, a prospector named Nathan Geddes filed a mineral claim in the hills, 12 miles northwest of the Tintic district. In terrain, the period maps mark only as rough ground. His claim file at the Utah Land Office describes a shaft he had sunk to 60 feet in search of copper. At 52 feet, he hit cut stone, not ore. Construction, flat-cut blocks of quartzite arranged in a linear pattern he described in the claim file as a wall. The blocks measured approximately 18 inches in length and 6 inches in height. The joints were tight, without mortar. The surface of the blocks was smooth in a way that quartzite does not achieve through natural pressure or geological exposure. Geddes filed his claim, noted the stone, and wrote to the Land Office asking whether the discovery affected his mineral rights. The Land Office replied that his rights were unaffected and that the stone was a natural feature. He moved to Nevada in 1898. The claim was never developed. The file is in the Utah State Archives. Quartzite does not plane to a smooth, flat surface through any natural process at depth. It is a metamorphic rock, hard and resistant, and its natural texture is granular. What produces smooth, flat faces on quartzite blocks, cut to consistent dimensions, is a chisel in skilled hands. The chisel that cut these blocks did its work long enough ago that the stone had been covered by 52 feet of alluvial fill and desert soil, long enough that the joints had closed with the slow settling of the ground above, and long enough that 2 bands of the Ute had a word for what these hills contained, and had passed that word to every generation that came after them. Not a word for what they had built, a word for what they had found already waiting. The brick wall at the 340-foot level of the silver ledge shaft has been there since September of 1893. The shaft was capped and secured by the Bureau of Land Management as part of its abandoned mine closure program and is on record at the BLM Fillmore Field Office as a secured historic mine opening. The coordinates of the collar are documented. The brick wall 240 feet directly below it is still there, set in hydraulic cement that has had 130 years to cure. It is not going anywhere. Behind it, at 31 feet, a chamber 12 feet across and 8 feet high, flat worked walls, a dry, pale dust floor. On the far wall, organized marks in horizontal rows, the cut edges sharp when Prout held his lamp to them in 1893. Those marks have been sealed from weathering since the 11th of September of that year. They have not changed. What they record, no living person has read, because the only man known to have examined them came back to the surface, sent his crew home, and spent the rest of his life in a coal county, and said to his daughter once, near the end of it, that he had found something in those hills that he wished he had not found. The Juab County Historical Society in Nephi holds Prout's letter. The Carbon County Historical Society in Price holds Clara Henshaw's interview transcript. The Utah State Historical Society holds Belk's survey map with its disused heading notation and the Emerald Mine Report signed by J.W. Fitch. The Church History Library in Salt Lake City holds Humphrey's journal with Sawatch's account. The Utah State Archives hold Geddes's claim file with its description of smooth quartzite blocks at 52 feet. The BLM Fillmore Field Office holds the capped shaft coordinates. None of these institutions has connected their piece to any of the others. Each record sits in its own collection, indexed under its own subject, surrounded by material that has nothing to do with a passage opened and sealed in 9 days in September of 1893. Ground-penetrating radar capable of mapping at 340-foot depth exists and has been used in mining archaeology across the American West. A purpose-built GPR survey of the Silver Ledge site could map the chamber, confirm its dimensions, and determine whether the marks on the far wall are still as Prout recorded them, without turning a single shovel of soil. The cost of a single survey day, with the appropriate equipment, falls within the budget of any university geology department within a day's drive of the Tintic district. That survey has not been proposed. It has not been funded. It has not been conducted. Sawatch told Caleb Humphrey in 1883 that there were places in the Tintic Hills that held something left by people the Ute did not know, and that the Ute had always understood those places were not theirs to open. Elias Prout opened one of them, not deliberately but because a blasting charge cannot steer around a chamber that no survey has recorded and no map has marked. A man named Fitch came down the shaft and looked at what Prout had found. The log went blank for 3 days. The brick went up on the 4th. Prout left the district and spent the rest of his life working coal, and told his daughter once, near the end of it, that he wished he had never found what he found. The brick wall is the record. The blank log is the record. The name that appears at 2 closures and then vanishes is the record. The word Pa-Vatz, the thing placed deliberately in the dark and meant to stay, is the record. Something was set in the stone beneath the Tintic Hills before any silver rush turned that ground into a commodity. In September of 1893, a careful man with a measuring rope was the last person known to have stood beside it. The wall went up, the door shut. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.